The forest does not announce the presence of a jaguar with drama. There is no roar echoing through the understory, no sudden movement that snaps the jungle into focus. What changes first is structure. Patterns shift. A trail becomes quieter than it should be. Birds adjust their spacing, not fleeing outright, but repositioning. The forest tightens in subtle ways that only make sense if you understand that something is reading it, not as scenery, but as data. The mistake people make is assuming jaguars hunt by scent alone, as if the smell of blood flips some primitive switch. That idea is comforting because it implies control. Avoid blood, avoid danger. Reality is less forgiving. Jaguars are not driven by chemical panic. They are driven by pattern recognition. They hunt by interpreting deviations from normal movement, normal spacing, normal use of terrain. Blood matters only insofar as it explains why a pattern has broken. A jaguar moving through its territory is not searching randomly. Its range is mapped in memory: river bends, game trails, salt licks, fallen trees that funnel movement. These are not just locations, but probabilities. Where prey usually crosses, where it hesitates, where it slows. Over time, these routes harden into expectation. A jaguar does not need to see an animal every day to know it is still there. It needs only to see that the forest is behaving as it always has. When something changes, the jaguar notices. A broken stem where none was yesterday. A patch of leaf litter scuffed at the wrong angle. A set of tracks that overlap when they shouldn't, suggesting hesitation or imbalance. Jaguars read footprints the way a forensic analyst reads a crime scene. Depth matters. How much weight was placed on each step. Spacing matters, whether strides are even or shortened. Direction matters, not just where something went, but why it chose that path instead of another. This is where injury becomes visible without ever being seen. A wounded animal does not move efficiently. It favors one side. It pauses too often or not enough. It avoids obstacles it would normally ignore or crashes through vegetation it would usually slip past. These micro-errors accumulate, creating a signature that stands out against the forest's baseline rhythm. To a jaguar, this is not weakness in the abstract. It is confirmation that energy math has shifted. The cost of pursuit has dropped. The risk of injury has fallen. The likelihood of success has risen. The jaguar does not need to see the prey to begin hunting it. Once the pattern resolves, the hunt is already underway. Humans underestimate this because we think of tracking as linear. Follow the trail, find the animal. Jaguars track in 3 dimensions and across time. They loop ahead, not behind, anticipating where compromised movement will funnel the prey next. They use terrain to force decisions, narrow game paths, steep banks, fallen logs that require a jump. Each obstacle magnifies the cost of injury. Each choice reduces options. Vision plays a role, but not in the way people imagine. Jaguars have excellent low-light vision, adapted to forest shade and twilight conditions, but sight is not the primary trigger. A jaguar does not need a clear visual to commit. It needs confirmation that the prey cannot respond effectively if contact is made. This is why attacks often seem sudden and close range. By the time the jaguar reveals itself, the decision was made long ago. The bite itself reflects this logic. Jaguars are unique among big cats for their killing technique. Instead of suffocating prey with a throat bite, They often deliver a crushing bite through the skull or cervical vertebrae, using immense jaw strength to end the interaction immediately. This reduces struggle, minimizes injury risk, and conserves energy. Against compromised prey, this method is devastatingly efficient. In natural systems, wounded animals are selected not because predators are cruel, but because ecosystems punish inefficiency. Injury slows movement, increases metabolic cost, and reduces vigilance. A limping deer, a weakened peccary, a primate with an infected bite. These individuals consume resources while contributing less to reproduction and population stability. Predation removes them, reallocating energy back into the system. This is not moral, it is mechanical. For humans, this creates a dangerous mismatch of expectations. We assume predators assess us as humans, large, upright, unfamiliar. In reality, jaguars assess us as moving objects within a pattern they already understand. A healthy human walking confidently along a trail is anomalous, but not immediately interpretable. A human who is limping, bleeding, or repeatedly using the same route becomes legible. Repeated routes are especially critical. Jaguars are ambush predators, not pursuit hunters. They rely on predicting where prey will be, not chasing it across open ground. When an animal, or a person, uses the same trail day after day, it collapses uncertainty. The jaguar does not need to search, it waits. Over time, even a non-prey species can be incorporated into the mental map as a predictable event. Add injury to that equation, and the calculus changes fast. A limp alters cadence. A shortened stride changes timing. A person favoring one leg places weight unevenly, leaving deeper impressions on one side. Even without visible blood, these cues signal compromise. To a jaguar, this does not mean easy kill in a dramatic sense. It means manageable risk. That distinction matters. Jaguars avoid unnecessary danger. They pass on prey that looks healthy, alert, and capable of fighting back. They commit when confidence outweighs uncertainty. This is why many documented jaguar attacks on humans involve people who were distracted, encumbered, injured, or following habitual routes. The animal did not suddenly decide to hunt a human. It recognized a convergence of factors that lowered the cost threshold enough to justify engagement. The forest itself amplifies this process. Dense vegetation limits escape options. Sound behaves unpredictably, masking approach. Thermoregulation also plays a role. Jaguars prefer to hunt during cooler periods when overheating is less likely and prey endurance is reduced. An injured animal generates more heat per unit distance traveled, tiring faster. A limping human in humid conditions experiences the same disadvantage, whether they realize it or not. There is an uncomfortable implication here. Predators like jaguars are not fooled by size, confidence, or intention. They respond to performance. How efficiently you move, how consistently you behave, how well you fit or fail to fit the expected pattern of the environment. Injury exposes that failure faster than anything else. This is not about fear, and it is not about bloodlust. It is about information. The jaguar does not need to see you clearly. It needs evidence that the forest has changed in a way that benefits it. Once that evidence accumulates, the hunt becomes inevitable, even if the moment of contact never arrives. Most of the time, the system resolves quietly. The jaguar shadows for a while, reassesses, then disengages when conditions shift. The human leaves the area, The trail pattern breaks, the anomaly disappears. But when the anomaly persists, when a wounded individual keeps moving the same way at the same time with the same compromised gait, the system tightens. Understanding this strips away mythology and replaces it with something more unsettling. The jaguar is not watching you. It is watching the forest. If the forest says you are vulnerable, that is enough. The first sign is not pain. It is order. On the forest floor, where leaf litter hides more life than it reveals, a line appears that should not exist. It moves with purpose, not wandering, not hesitating, flowing around obstacles as if the ground itself has been instructed to rearrange. Army ants do not announce themselves with sound or color. They announce themselves with geometry. A front edge, sharp and advancing. A trailing density that thickens by the second. What looks like a trickle becomes a sheet, and then a living surface that replaces the forest floor with motion. The mistake is assuming the danger lies in the bite. Army ants do not rely on venom. Their mandibles are small, designed to grip and tear, not inject toxins. One ant is an irritation. 10 are uncomfortable. 1,000 are a mechanism. The threat is not chemistry, it is scale, speed, and coordination. You are not being attacked by animals in the usual sense. You are being overtaken by a system. Army ants operate on a rule that feels counterintuitive to human instincts. Movement buys time. Stillness kills you. These ants are nomadic predators, advancing in massive raiding columns that flush prey rather than stalk it. Insects, spiders, small vertebrates, anything slow enough is overwhelmed. Prey does not need to be located individually, it is discovered statistically. If you are in the path, you are found. If you stop, you are climbed. This is the living flood rule, and it governs every interaction with army ants. They do not swarm upward because they are aggressive. They swarm upward because their world is vertical as much as horizontal. In the leaf litter, most prey escapes by climbing stems, trunks, or roots. Army ants evolve to follow. When the ground becomes saturated with ants, the only unexplored surface is whatever is above them. That includes you. Stillness is interpreted as structure. The ants' sensory world is built around chemical gradients and physical contact. They do not see targets from a distance. They encounter them. Antennae sweep, touch, sample. If the surface is inert, warm, and emitting the wrong chemical signals, the system escalates. One ant becomes 10. 10 become a column. The flood redirects upward, flowing over boots, socks, skin. Climbing is not a choice. It is the default response to an obstacle that does not move away. This is where human biology betrays us. Blood, sweat, and carbon dioxide are not dramatic signals on their own. In the Amazon, everything sweats. Everything bleeds eventually. Everything exhales. What matters is concentration and context. A small cut leaks compounds that ants can detect at close range. Sweat pools under clothing, soaking fibers with salts and organic molecules. CO2 accumulates near still bodies, especially in humid, low airflow understory. None of these signals scream prey individually. Together, combined with stillness, they resolve into certainty. Army ants are fast not because each ant moves quickly, but because information propagates instantly through the mass. A discovery at the front is reinforced by chemical trails that thicken as more ants follow. This positive feedback loop is ruthless. The longer you remain in contact with the swarm, the faster escalation occurs. The system is designed to exploit hesitation. From an ecological perspective, this makes perfect sense. Army ants function as mobile ecosystem resets. Their raids flush entire communities of arthropods into motion, exposing hidden species, redistributing energy, and creating feeding opportunities for birds and other predators that track the swarm's progress. Antbirds, in particular, have evolved to live alongside this phenomenon, shadowing columns to snatch prey, escaping the oncoming flood. The ants themselves are not interested in these birds. They are focused forward, not outward. Their power lies in momentum. That momentum does not care what you are. A person who stumbles into a raid front and freezes, out of confusion, fear, or underestimation, creates the worst possible target. Clothing becomes scaffolding. Seams and folds trap ants, slowing removal. As ants bite, the instinct is to stop and brush them away, but stopping only increases contact time. The bites themselves are not lethal, but they accumulate rapidly, especially in soft areas where skin is thin and blood supply is high. Ankles, behind knees, groin, armpits. The ants grip, anchor and tear as the body moves, causing multiple small wounds that bleed freely. This is where the wound call feedback loop begins. Each bite creates new damaged tissue. Each damaged patch releases fresh chemical cues. Blood does not attract the ants from meters away, but it ensures that every ant already in contact stays engaged. Sweat increases as stress rises. Breathing deepens, pumping more CO2 into the microenvironment around the body. The system does not need to search anymore. It is already there. The cruel efficiency of army ants is that they do not need to overwhelm the entire body to incapacitate. Enough bites in the wrong places cause panic, loss of coordination, and poor decision-making. People trip while trying to flee, increasing ground contact. Falls multiply exposure. What began as a manageable encounter becomes a cascading failure driven by physics and physiology rather than aggression. In nature, animals rarely stop. That is the difference. Most forest creatures respond to army ants with immediate displacement. They flee laterally, climb quickly, or abandon territory altogether. Even slow animals have strategies. Frogs leap blindly, insects take to the air, small mammals bolt without direction. The ants do not chase individuals, they replace space. Anything that remains inside that space long enough is processed. Humans, by contrast, are trained to stop and assess. We freeze to think. In this context, that instinct is fatal, not because the ants are deadly, but because the system punishes delay exponentially. Every second stationary increases contact surface. Every attempt to stand still and deal with it gives the flood time to rise. There is a dark irony here. Army ants are among the most ecologically important organisms in the rainforest. They regulate populations, prevent monopolization by any single species, and drive constant redistribution of biomass. Their raids create temporary clearings of life that allow new growth and movement patterns to emerge. They are not malicious. They are maintenance. But maintenance systems are indifferent to intent. Understanding army ants requires abandoning the idea of individual threat. You are not being targeted because you are edible. You are being absorbed because you failed to vacate a moving zone of exclusion. Blood, sweat, and CO2 do not lure the ants like bait. They simply confirm that the surface they are climbing is alive and worth continuing to explore. This is why experienced forest workers react instantly. They move first and think later. Shake, run, clear clothing, relocate. They do not wait to identify the species or assess severity. They recognize the pattern. The forest floor is no longer safe, and safety will not return until distance is created. The nightmare of army ants is not pain. Pain is manageable. The nightmare is speed without intent, numbers without emotion, and a rule set that punishes hesitation with mathematical certainty. Stop moving and the system climbs you. Bleed, sweat, or breathe hard, and the system stays with you. The ants do not need to kill you to win. They only need you to stay long enough for the environment to finish the work. In the Amazon, this is a recurring theme. Danger rarely arrives as a singular, dramatic act. It arrives as convergence, signals overlapping, rules compounding, small biological facts aligning into something unstoppable. Army ants embody that principle perfectly. They are not a monster in the forest. They are the forest briefly rearranged into motion. The contact is brief enough to be dismissed. A forearm brushes a leaf edge while moving through understory, or a bare hand steadies against a trunk slick with humidity and lichen. There is no immediate pain sharp enough to force attention, only a faint prickling sensation that could be blamed on thorns, ants, or imagination. The forest does not announce what just happened. It waits. Venomous caterpillars do not hunt. They do not chase, ambush, or stalk. Their danger lies in a defensive architecture so well integrated into the environment that contact feels accidental, because it is. These larvae survive by making themselves unhandleable. Bright colors advertise that fact to predators who have learned the lesson. Humans, however, interact with the forest differently. We push through vegetation. We brace. We grab. We brush. And when pain follows, we do exactly the wrong thing. This is the cut multiplier. Venomous caterpillars are not coated in venom. They are armed with it. Their bodies are covered in spines, setae, or hollow hairs. Structures evolved not to pierce deeply in a single strike, but to embed easily and break off. Each spine is a delivery system, tipped or filled with toxin that is released when pressure snaps it free from the caterpillar's body. The caterpillar does not inject venom actively. You inject yourself by touching it. The initial contact embeds dozens, sometimes hundreds, of microscopic spines into the outer layers of skin. Some are shallow, some penetrate deeper, depending on pressure and movement. The venom they carry varies by species, but the effect follows a familiar arc: burning pain, swelling, redness, and an urge to react immediately. That urge is where the forest collects its penalty. Scratching feels logical. Pain signals demand action. The brain interprets the sensation as irritation that can be rubbed away. But rubbing does not remove the problem. It multiplies it. Each pass of the hand drags embedded spines laterally, snapping them into shorter fragments and driving them deeper. Others are dislodged from the skin only to re-embed nearby, spreading the affected area. What was once a localized exposure becomes a constellation of micro-wounds. This is not metaphorical damage. It is mechanical. Under magnification, skin exposed to venomous caterpillars looks like a field of splinters. Each broken spine is a foreign body triggering inflammation. Blood vessels dilate. Fluid leaks into surrounding tissue. The venom compounds amplify this response, causing pain disproportionate to the size of the injury. Scratching adds abrasion, opening new pathways for both venom spread and secondary infection. The skin barrier, already compromised, collapses further with each panicked reaction. The forest punishes panic not with malice, but with physics. Embedded spines are notoriously difficult to remove precisely because they are designed to break. Tweezers struggle to grasp fragments thinner than a human hair. Washing can help only if done gently and immediately before spines are driven deeper. Adhesive methods, tape, resin, can remove surface fragments, but only if the area has not already been rubbed raw. Delay narrows options quickly. In some species, such as those infamous in South America, the venom does more than inflame. It interferes with blood clotting, disrupts cellular membranes, or triggers systemic effects if enough toxin enters circulation. These outcomes are rare but real, and they hinge not on the initial contact alone, but on how much venom is released and how widely it is distributed. Scratching, rubbing, and pressing increase both. From an ecological perspective, this design is elegant. Caterpillars are slow, defenseless in every conventional sense. They cannot flee effectively, cannot bite, cannot sting in a directed way. Their survival depends on turning predators' instincts against them. A bird that grabs a venomous caterpillar learns quickly: pain in the mouth, swelling, discomfort. If the bird tries to shake it off, the damage increases. The lesson is reinforced brutally and efficiently. Over evolutionary time, predators that ignore the warning signals are removed from the gene pool. Humans arrive without that evolutionary education. We misread the cues because we are not predators in this context. We are accidental contacts, large animals blundering through micro-scale defenses. Bright colors register as interesting, not dangerous. Hairy textures look soft. The pain arrives after contact, not before, breaking our expectation of warning before harm. The most useful aspect of this chapter is not fear, but embarrassment. Not shame, clarity. The forest does not care if you feel foolish. It cares whether you learn. Venomous caterpillar injuries are almost never catastrophic at the moment of contact. They become serious when compounded by behavior. Repeated scratching increases venom load. Broken skin invites bacteria. Swelling reduces circulation, slowing toxin clearance. Stress raises heart rate, spreading compounds faster. The system amplifies itself quietly, driven by reflexes that evolved for different threats. There is a pattern here that mirrors every previous chapter. The initial danger is small. The escalation comes from response. The Amazon does not attack you outright. It gives you a chance to make things worse. Thermoregulation adds another layer. In hot, humid environments, blood vessels near the skin surface are already dilated to shed heat. This increases venom absorption. Sweat softens the skin, making penetration easier. Cooling behaviors, resting, stopping, leaning against vegetation, raise exposure risk if contact occurs again. A person already irritated and itchy is more likely to brush against foliage carelessly, repeating the cycle. Migration patterns of caterpillars also matter. Many species feed in groups or rest in clusters, aligned along branches or trunks. One careless contact rarely involves a single individual. Multiple caterpillars mean exponential spine exposure. The victim does not realize this until pain spreads beyond the point of contact, radiating along the limb or blooming across a wider area. The lesson is not to be perfect. It is to be calm. In the Amazon, composure is a survival trait. Slow, deliberate movements reduce pressure and friction. Gentle handling limits spine breakage. Controlled responses keep damage localized. Panic turns a defensive adaptation into a serious medical problem. This is why experienced forest workers react the way they do. They freeze not in fear, but in calculation. They do not rub. They do not slap. They isolate the area, immobilize it, and address the injury methodically. It looks counterintuitive to outsiders, doing nothing when pain demands action, but it is the only approach that keeps the cut multiplier from spinning out of control. Venomous caterpillars are not cruel. They are not aggressive. They are architects of consequence. Their spines are lessons written in keratin and toxin, teaching through cause and effect. Touch lightly, and you suffer lightly. React wildly, and the forest escalates without mercy. By the time swelling peaks and pain throbs steadily, the caterpillar is long gone. The interaction feels unfair, disconnected, but the logic is intact. You were given information. You responded poorly. The system responded honestly. This chapter exists to make the audience uncomfortable in a productive way. Not afraid of the forest, but aware of their own reflexes. The Amazon does not demand courage. It demands restraint. When you brush against something that hurts, the instinct to fight back is the most dangerous move you can make. Predators are usually introduced as scale, muscle, teeth, reach, something large enough to overpower you in a single decisive act. That framing is comforting because it implies that danger is visible, audible, dramatic. In the Amazon, that assumption fails early. Some of the most effective predators in the system are small enough to miss entirely, operating not through force, but through chemistry, patience, and timing. The assassin bug belongs to this category, a hunter that does not chase, does not strike explosively, and does not need to kill quickly to win. On a tree trunk, it looks like debris, angular, matte, motionless. Its body breaks into sharp planes that echo bark fissures and leaf scars. Legs tuck close, antennae held at angles that mimic twigs. This is not camouflage designed to hide from prey alone. It is camouflage designed to erase the idea of animal from the scene entirely. Assassin bugs hunt by remaining unregistered. If nothing notices them, everything becomes possible. They are predators first, parasites only by accident. Insects, spiders, even small vertebrates fall victim to a feeding method that is slow, controlled, and devastating. The assassin bug does not chew or tear. It feeds by injection. A rigid, needle-like proboscis folds beneath the head when not in use, then snaps forward with precision. Once inserted, the real work begins. Saliva flows into the wound, not simple digestive fluid, but a complex cocktail of enzymes and toxins. These compounds paralyze tissue locally, break down cell membranes, and liquefy internal structures. The prey does not bleed out. It dissolves from the inside, becoming a nutrient slurry that the bug then drinks back through the same channel. Feeding is not fast. It can take minutes or hours, during which the assassin bug remains largely still, anchored by its legs, maintaining pressure and control. This feeding strategy explains why bites hurt the way they do. When an assassin bug bites a human, it is not defending itself with venom in the conventional sense. It is attempting to feed, or reacting as if feeding might be necessary. The injected saliva is optimized to disable insects, but human tissue responds violently to it. Pain arrives sharp and immediate, disproportionate to the size of the wound. Swelling follows as the immune system floods the area, reacting not just to physical injury, but to foreign enzymes actively breaking tissue down. The bite itself is often small, easy to dismiss at first glance. What lingers is the inflammation. Tissue becomes hot, tight, tender. The enzymes continue working even after the bug disengages, and secondary infection becomes a real risk if bacteria exploit the damaged area. This is not a mechanical injury, it is a chemical one, and chemistry persists after contact ends. In the forest, assassin bugs are not rare. They occupy a wide range of niches, on tree trunks, under leaves, near lights, around camps, inside structures. Many species are nocturnal, emerging when visibility drops and human vigilance follows. They are attracted not to blood specifically, but to opportunity, places where prey density is high, where insects gather, where stillness creates predictable surfaces to explore. This is where the wound call principle applies again, but in a subtler form. Open skin does not broadcast danger across the forest, but it changes local conditions. Moisture accumulates. Odor shifts. Heat increases as inflammation draws blood to the surface. To a small predator operating at contact range, these changes matter. An assassin bug does not need to detect you from meters away. It needs to decide what to do once it has already made contact. Stillness increases that contact window dramatically. A person sitting, sleeping, or resting creates stable surfaces. Skin presses against fabric. Limbs remain in place. An assassin bug exploring a surface will retreat if disturbed quickly. If not, it probes. Antennae touch. The proboscis tests. A bite follows not out of aggression, but because the bug's sensory input suggests a viable feeding opportunity or a threat that must be neutralized. Human reactions often make this worse. The instinct to stay still when something crawls on you, to avoid startling it, works against you here. The longer contact persists, the more likely the bug is to escalate from exploration to injection. Once the proboscis penetrates, the encounter is already costly, even if it ends immediately. Ecologically, assassin bugs play a crucial role as population regulators. They remove large numbers of other insects, including agricultural pests and disease vectors. Their slow feeding style allows them to exploit prey that would be too risky to tackle otherwise. They are not fast, but they are precise. In a system where energy efficiency determines survival, that precision matters. Their relationship with humans is incidental, but consequential. Some species, particularly those that feed opportunistically, have adapted well to human-modified environments. Artificial light attracts insects. Insects attract predators. Camps, villages, and houses become hunting grounds, not because humans are prey, but because humans create prey-rich micro-habitats. There is an added layer of risk in tropical environments where immune responses are already taxed. Heat dilates blood vessels. Sweat keeps skin moist. Minor cuts from vegetation, insect bites, or daily labor are common. Each one creates a small local breakdown in the skin's barrier function. Assassin bug saliva exploits exactly that kind of vulnerability. The result is a bite that does not just hurt, but lingers, sometimes for days or weeks. The swelling is not just cosmetic. It reflects deep tissue irritation and occasionally necrosis where enzymes caused localized cell death. Scratching worsens this, reopening skin and inviting bacterial colonization. The bite becomes a site of ongoing interaction between chemistry, microbes, and immune response. Again, the danger is not immediate catastrophe, but delayed complication. This reframes the idea of predation entirely. You do not need to be chased, overpowered, or even noticed as food in the human sense. You need only to be accessible, still, and chemically interesting. Assassin bugs demonstrate that predation can be intimate, slow, and almost accidental, an outcome of overlapping needs rather than intent. There is a quiet irony in how often these bites occur during rest. Sleep, the state we associate with safety, strips away motion and awareness. Body heat stabilizes. Breathing becomes rhythmic. Skin remains exposed for long periods. To a predator that feeds by patience, sleep is not vulnerability because of unconsciousness, but because of predictability. Understanding assassin bugs forces a recalibration of what dangerous animal means. Size is irrelevant. Speed is optional. What matters is the ability to exploit moments when defenses are down and signals align. Injection replaces force. Enzymes replace teeth. Time replaces spectacle. In the broader structure of the Amazon, this is consistent. The ecosystem does not rely on singular dramatic threats. It relies on layered pressures that punish stillness, injury, and inattention across scales. The assassin bug is simply one of the smallest enforcers of that rule. You may never see it. You may never feel more than a sharp sting and a wave of swelling. But the interaction leaves a mark, not because the bug is malicious, but because it is perfectly adapted to take advantage of what the environment offers. Open skin, warm tissue, a moment of stillness. That is all it needs. Predators are not only big animals. Sometimes they fit on the head of a pin, carry their weapon in a syringe-like mouthpart, and win by waiting for you to stop moving. Pain is usually framed as a consequence. In the Amazon, pain is often a tool. Bullet ants do not rely on stealth, speed, or numbers to win encounters with large animals. They rely on neurological overload. Their sting is not meant to kill, disable, or poison in the conventional sense. It is designed to hijack the nervous system so completely that everything else collapses: balance, judgment, coordination, restraint. For a few critical minutes, the ant controls your behavior better than you do. This chapter is not about toxicity. It is about forced error. Bullet ants live where people put their hands. That is the first mistake most encounters share. They nest at the base of trees, in root systems, inside rotting wood, and along the very structures humans use for stability in the forest. Trunks are grabbed to steady footing. Vines are pulled for leverage. Branches are leaned on during climbs or descents. These are sensible human behaviors in uneven terrain, and exactly why bullet ants evolved to guard these locations so aggressively. The ants themselves are not wandering hazards. They are territorial sentries. Their nests are fixed, their patrol routes predictable, their threat posture clear to animals that have learned the cues. Humans miss those cues because we are not tuned to read ant territory the way monkeys, sloths, or birds are. We see a tree. They see a defended structure. When contact happens, it is rarely intentional. A hand grips bark just above a nest entrance. A forearm presses against a trunk where ants are moving along a foraging trail. Fingers curl around a vine that happens to be part of a living corridor. The ant does not need time to assess. Its decision tree is short. Intrusion detected, sting delivered. The sting itself is fast. but the effects are anything but brief. Bullet ant venom contains a neurotoxic peptide that locks sodium channels in nerve cells open, forcing continuous firing. The signal does not fade. It compounds. Pain arrives not as a sharp spike, but as a sustained electrical storm that overwhelms sensory processing. Muscles tremble. Limbs feel unreliable. Breathing becomes shallow and erratic, not because the lungs are compromised, but because the brain is drowning in signal. This is not exaggeration. It is design. From an evolutionary perspective, bullet ants do not need to kill predators. They need to make contact so costly that no animal repeats the mistake. A monkey that grabs the wrong trunk once and experiences this level of pain does not test that boundary again. The memory is etched deeply and permanently. The venom is not lethal because lethality would remove the teacher. Pain preserves the lesson. For humans, the problem is not the pain itself. Pain passes. The problem is what happens during pain. The sting forces bad decisions. It does this reliably across individuals, cultures, and experience levels. Even people who know what a bullet ant sting is like cannot fully override the reflexive response. Hands open involuntarily. Muscles spasm. Balance falters. Attention collapses inward, focused entirely on the affected limb. The forest does not pause while this happens. Falls are common. A person gripping a trunk releases it abruptly. A climber loses purchase. Someone leaning for support stumbles sideways. The terrain does not forgive sudden loss of control. Roots catch ankles. Rocks shift. Thorns and broken branches tear skin. What began as a single, localized injury becomes a cascade of secondary damage. This is where the wound call re-enters the system. Cuts bleed. Abrasions open skin. Blood enters an environment where blood is never neutral. Movement becomes clumsy, uneven, compromised. Pain narrows perception, making it harder to assess surroundings or respond calmly to new threats. A person who was stable seconds ago is now broadcasting vulnerability in multiple channels at once: chemical, mechanical, behavioral. The bullet ant does not care about this cascade. Its role is complete the moment the sting lands. But the ecosystem responds to the consequences. From a biological standpoint, this is a brutally efficient strategy. One small insect can redirect the behavior of a much larger organism without expending significant energy or risking prolonged contact. The ant does not chase. It does not swarm. It delivers a single decisive neurological disruption and lets physics and psychology do the rest. The irony is that many people assume bullet ant stings happen because someone was careless or unlucky. In reality, they happen because people are doing exactly what they should do to move safely through the forest: gripping, leaning, stabilizing. The ants exploit necessity, not stupidity. The lesson is not, don't touch anything, which is impossible. The lesson is, understand what touching costs. There is also a timing component that rarely gets discussed. Bullet ants are most active during periods when humans are also most active, cooler parts of the day when movement is easier and heat stress lower. This overlap increases encounter probability. Sweat softens skin. Hands slide more easily, requiring firmer grips. Firmer grips mean deeper contact, more pressure, higher sting likelihood. Once stung, the body's stress response amplifies everything. Heart rate spikes. Blood pressure rises. Sweat increases. These physiological changes are adaptive in many contexts, but here they worsen outcomes. Increased sweating makes hands slip more. Elevated heart rate spreads venom effects faster through the affected limb. Panic accelerates movement without coordination, increasing fall risk further. The forest does not need to add danger at this stage. You supply it yourself. This is why bullet ant stings are often remembered not as isolated events, but as turning points, moments when a day went from controlled to chaotic. The sting is not just painful. It destabilizes the entire interaction between human and environment. In ecological terms, bullet ants are engineers of avoidance. Their nests create exclusion zones around key structures, shaping how animals move through the forest. Over time, trails form that route around these defended points. Species that ignore the signals are corrected harshly and quickly. The system self-organizes around the pain. Humans, entering temporarily, do not benefit from that long-term learning. We step into a map we cannot see, governed by rules we do not intuit. When we violate those rules, the feedback is immediate and overwhelming. The most dangerous assumption is that pain equals danger resolved. People often think, "I've been stung, now I just need to endure it." That mindset ignores the secondary risks that unfold afterward. The sting does not end the threat. It creates a new one by compromising your ability to move safely, make decisions, and protect your body from further harm. This chapter matters because it connects the dots explicitly. Pain is not the end point. Pain is the mechanism that drives you into worse situations. A bullet ant does not need venom that kills tissue. It needs venom that hijacks you long enough for gravity, terrain, and your own reflexes to do the rest. By the time the pain subsides, hours later, sometimes longer, the damage is already done. Cuts have been opened. Infections have been seeded. You are tired, dehydrated, and shaken. The ant is irrelevant now. The system has moved on. Understanding bullet ants changes how you interpret pain in the forest. Pain is not always a warning to stop. Sometimes it is a trap designed to make you stop thinking. The Amazon is full of animals that use teeth, venom, or force to win encounters. Bullet ants use something more reliable. They use you against yourself. At first, nothing seems to happen. The air is heavy, saturated with moisture, but still. The forest hums with its usual background noise, cicadas winding up and down, distant bird calls folding into one another. You stand or walk or rest, feeling intact, present, unthreatened. Mosquitoes do not arrive like army ants or caimans. There is no front edge, no visible mass. They assemble invisibly, guided by gradients you cannot sense and signals you cannot turn off. This is the chapter where danger does not announce itself with pain or spectacle. It announces itself later. Mosquitoes are not random biters drifting through space. They are precision instruments tuned to the byproducts of life. Carbon dioxide is their long-range beacon. Every exhale forms an expanding plume that drifts and curls through the understory, a three-dimensional trail advertising respiration. Female mosquitoes, because only females bite, fly up these plumes like scent rivers, zigzagging until concentration increases. CO2 does not tell them what you are, only that something warm and breathing exists. That is enough to initiate search mode. Once close, other layers resolve. Heat radiates from exposed skin, especially from joints where blood flows near the surface. Infrared sensitivity allows mosquitoes to discriminate temperature differences finer than a single degree. Odor completes the lock. Human skin hosts a vast microbial community, and the metabolic byproducts of those microbes, carboxylic acids, ammonia, sulfur compounds, vary subtly from person to person. To mosquitoes, this is not unpleasant. It is a fingerprint. Wounds matter here not because they smell like blood in a dramatic sense, but because they break barriers. Intact skin is a defensive surface, dry, textured, relatively poor in exposed capillaries. A small cut changes that. Moisture accumulates. Local temperature increases as inflammation draws blood to the area. Chemical signals shift as damaged cells release compounds not normally present at the surface. What was once a uniform landscape becomes a highlighted target. This is why mosquito bites cluster the way they do. Ankles and elbows are not chosen by preference. They are chosen by physics and physiology. Ankles sit low, where CO2 pools and drifts more slowly in still air. They are often uncovered, thin-skinned, and richly supplied with blood vessels that help regulate body temperature. Elbows and knees share similar traits: flexion points where skin stretches and thins, sweat collects, and heat escapes. Clothing rubs these areas, trapping moisture and odor. Movement pumps blood through them. To a mosquito, these sites are efficient. Sweat amplifies everything. As the body works to cool itself, sweat glands excrete fluid laced with salts and organic molecules. Evaporation is imperfect in humid environments like the Amazon. Instead of cooling, sweat lingers, feeding skin bacteria that convert it into stronger odor cues. Increased respiration during exertion thickens CO2 plumes. Heat output rises. The more uncomfortable you become, the more legible you are. The swarm, when it exists, is asynchronous. You are not surrounded by hundreds at once. You are visited by dozens over time, each acting independently but guided by the same invisible map. A bite lands, you swat. Another lands somewhere else. The irritation feels manageable, even trivial. This is the most dangerous phase because it encourages dismissal. Mosquitoes are not predators in the classical sense. They do not kill their hosts directly. Their evolutionary role is parasitic, exploiting blood meals to fuel egg production. But parasitism scales differently in tropical ecosystems. High biodiversity means high pathogen diversity. Mosquitoes become moving syringes, bridging species that would never otherwise exchange fluids. Viruses, protozoa, and worms hitch rides through populations, their success tied not to immediate damage, but to delayed effect. This is why the consequence hook arrives later. When a mosquito feeds, it does not simply draw blood. It injects saliva containing anticoagulants and immunomodulatory compounds that prevent clotting and dull local immune response. This allows uninterrupted feeding, but it also creates a window, microscopic, localized, where pathogens have easier access to the bloodstream. The bite itself may barely itch. The transaction is complete before you notice. In the Amazon, this transaction happens repeatedly. One bite is unlikely to matter. Many bites increase probability. The risk is cumulative, not additive. You do not feel a countdown start because nothing in your body signals urgency. There is no immediate pain, no visible wound demanding attention. The system relies on your normalcy bias, the assumption that feeling fine means being fine. Ecologically, mosquitoes occupy a strange position. Their larvae filter organic material from standing water, contributing to nutrient cycling. They feed fish, amphibians, birds. Adults pollinate some plant species. They are not aberrations. They are integrated. The problem is not their existence, but the density of interactions they facilitate. An injured person in the forest becomes an especially efficient node in this network. Small wounds leak plasma. Scratches open skin. Inflammation raises local temperature. Mosquitoes are drawn not because they sense weakness emotionally, but because the statistical efficiency of feeding improves. Easier access means shorter feeding time, lower risk of being killed mid-meal, higher reproductive payoff. Nature selects for that logic relentlessly. What makes this insidious is how clean the exchange feels. There is no dramatic attack to anchor memory. Days later, when fever rises or joints ache or fatigue deepens inexplicably, the bites are forgotten. The mind struggles to connect cause and effect across time. In ecological terms, the mosquito's success depends on this disconnect. If hosts immediately associated bites with consequence, behavior would change faster than pathogens could adapt. Clusters of bites often mark more than feeding preference. They reveal how mosquitoes exploit circulation. Areas with good blood flow refill quickly after feeding, allowing multiple bites in close proximity without diminishing returns. Ankles swell not just from immune response, but because repeated feeding disrupts local lymphatic drainage. Scratching worsens this, creating micro-abrasions that invite secondary infection and further odor production. The cycle reinforces itself quietly. There is a deeper layer here tied to human movement. When people stop, resting, sleeping, sitting, the distribution of signals stabilizes. CO2 plumes become steady. Heat gradients sharpen. Sweat accumulates. Stillness, once again, becomes structure. Mosquitoes do not need you to be helpless. They need you to be predictable. This is why bites often worsen at night or during rest periods, even when people believe they are protected. Nets shift. Exposed skin touches fabric. Condensation builds. The microenvironment inside a shelter becomes richer in cues than the open forest. Mosquitoes exploit boundaries, edges, seams, the same way other Amazonian dangers do. The narrative mistake is treating mosquitoes as background annoyance rather than active participants in the ecosystem's risk economy. They are not dramatic enough to fear, but too effective to ignore. Their danger lies not in any single bite, but in how seamlessly they integrate into normal experience. You do not flee mosquitoes. You tolerate them. That tolerance is the opening. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes them one of the most successful animals on Earth. They do not challenge their hosts directly. They use hosts' own biology, breathing, sweating, healing, against them. Wounds are not just injuries, they are invitations written in chemistry and heat. The Amazon does not always punish immediately. Often it waits. The forest allows you to leave, to feel intact, to assume nothing happened. Then, somewhere else, removed from the riverbank or trail or camp, consequences surface. Fever, infection, weakness, systems compromised without obvious origin. The mosquito does not need to be present for this phase. Its role is already complete. This is the invisible swarm, not a cloud you run from, but a network you pass through without noticing. You feel fine now. That means nothing. In this ecosystem, delay is not mercy. It is design. The riverbank, is not neutral ground. It looks passive, mud sloped gently into water, roots stitching the soil together, floating leaves pressed flat against the surface. But in ecological terms, it is a toll booth. Everything that crosses this edge pays something, whether it realizes it or not. Blood, splashing, vibration, hesitation. These are the currencies. In the Amazon, the waterline is not just where land meets river. It is where information concentrates, where signals collide, where predators that live by patience collect their tax. Caimans do not patrol rivers the way large fish do, nor do they roam like jaguars along the forest edge. They wait. Their bodies are engineered for stillness, flattened and armored, lungs and buoyancy precisely balanced, so that only the bare minimum breaks the surface. Eyes and nostrils rise just high enough to sample the world above water, while the rest of the animal dissolves into shadow. From a distance, the head looks like driftwood, or a half-submerged log nudged into place by the current. This illusion is not accidental. It is the product of millions of years refining what it means to be invisible in plain sight. At the waterline, vision behaves differently. Light refracts, reflections fragment shapes, and movement becomes more informative than form. Caimans exploit this perfectly. Their eyes are positioned high on the skull, giving them a shallow panoramic view of the bank, while remaining almost entirely submerged. They are not scanning for detail, they are reading motion. A ripple where there should be none. A splash that carries urgency rather than randomness. A pattern of movement that suggests imbalance. Blood entering the water does not scream danger by itself, but combined with disturbance, it sharpens the picture. It tells the caiman not just that something is injured, but that it is close. Ambush is often described as sudden, but for a caiman it begins long before the strike. Distance is closed invisibly, not by swimming directly toward the target, but by aligning with currents, using submerged contours, advancing when surface noise masks movement. Each small adjustment is timed to external distraction. A fish jumping, a branch falling, rain dimpling the surface. To the animal on shore, nothing changes. To the caiman, the geometry of opportunity tightens. This is where humans misjudge the danger. We think of large predators as obvious threats, something we would notice if we were paying attention. But caimans specialize in threats that do not announce themselves. A person washing hands at the river's edge, a fisherman rinsing a cut, someone slipping and catching themselves with a splash. These moments compress space faster than most people realize. The caiman does not need sustained commotion. A single sharp disturbance is enough to recalibrate distance. One mistake moves the interaction from observation to execution. The mechanics of the strike are brutally efficient. The caiman launches from stillness using its tail as a compressed spring, converting stored muscular tension into forward momentum. The jaws close with a force designed not just to puncture, but to crush. This is not a bite optimized for slicing flesh cleanly. It is a grip meant to immobilize, to damage deeply enough that escape becomes unlikely, even if contact is brief. In many cases, the victim is not dragged under or killed outright. A hand, a forearm, a leg is seized, shaken, and released as the caiman reassesses risk. Survival in these moments creates a dangerous illusion. The person pulls free, bleeding but alive, the predator slipping back into the water as silently as it arrived. From the outside, it looks like a narrow escape. In reality, it is the beginning of a longer failure cascade. Caiman bites are uniquely destructive because of how they combine trauma types. The teeth puncture and tear, But the real damage comes from the pressure. Bones crack, soft tissue is crushed, blood vessels collapse. Even when the skin remains partially intact, the underlying damage is extensive. This creates pockets of dead tissue, areas where blood flow is compromised, oxygen delivery is poor, and the immune system struggles to operate effectively. In a clean environment, this would already be dangerous. In a tropical river, it is catastrophic. Amazonian waterways are biologically dense in ways that are difficult to overstate. Warm temperatures accelerate bacterial growth, and organic matter constantly feeds microbial communities. Species of bacteria that are harmless in small numbers become aggressive when introduced directly into damaged tissue. A caiman bite does not merely introduce these organisms, it drives them deep, carried by the force of the impact into muscle and fascia. What looks like a superficial wound at the surface conceals an infection seeded far below. This is why survived bites often rot from the inside out. Swelling increases as inflammation builds, but circulation remains poor. Antibiotics, if delayed or improperly targeted, struggle to reach the affected areas. Necrosis follows, not because the bacteria are exotic, but because the tissue environment has been rendered defenseless. The river does not need venom to finish the job. It uses physics and biology instead. From an ecological standpoint, this makes sense. Caimans are not designed to consume every animal they injure. Many of their interactions end in partial damage, with prey escaping only to succumb later to infection, blood loss, or reduced mobility. These secondary deaths feed the ecosystem indirectly, providing carcasses for scavengers and nutrients for aquatic systems. The predator's role extends beyond the immediate kill, shaping survival outcomes across time rather than moments. Thermoregulation plays a subtle role in this process as well. Caimans bask to raise body temperature, increasing digestive efficiency and muscular performance. Warmer muscles contract faster, strikes become more explosive, and recovery between efforts shortens. During hotter periods, caimans can afford to be more selective, engaging only when conditions favor success. During cooler or overcast days, they may tolerate higher risk, relying on ambush precision rather than raw speed. For humans, this means that danger does not correlate cleanly with visibility or time of day. The predator's internal state matters as much as external conditions. The riverbank tax is paid most often by those who underestimate this layered system. Blood in the water is not a beacon, it is a modifier. Splashing is not an invitation, it is a confirmation. Together, they transform a neutral edge into an active hunting zone. The caiman does not chase people down the bank, nor does it attack indiscriminately. It responds to compounded signals that indicate vulnerability within reach. What makes this especially insidious is how quickly the danger resets. Once the opportunity passes, the caiman resumes its stillness. The river looks unchanged. The victim walks away, carrying the damage with them. Hours later, pain increases. Days later, tissue darkens, swelling spreads, fever sets in. By the time the full cost becomes apparent, the encounter itself feels distant, almost unreal. The predator has vanished, but the ecosystem's signature remains written into the wound. This is the deeper truth behind caiman encounters. The attack is rarely the end of the story. Survival does not mean escape from consequence. In the Amazon, injury is a process, not an event. A bite is not a moment of violence, but the opening chapter of a biological negotiation between tissue, microbes, and time. The riverbank collects its tax up front. But the interest compounds quietly, long after the surface has gone still again. Understanding this reframes fear. The caiman is not terrifying because it lunges without warning, but because it operates within a system that punishes small errors with delayed, escalating costs. It is a predator perfectly adapted to an environment where patience outperforms speed, and where damage does not need to be immediate to be fatal. At the waterline, nothing dramatic has to happen. A little blood, a little movement, and the river begins to take what it is owed. The water looks inert at first glance, a brown-green sheet sliding past the riverbank with the slow confidence of something that has moved this way for millions of years. Sunlight fractures on the surface, breaking into glittering shards that hide depth rather than reveal it. The bank smells of wet clay and decomposing leaves, a sour, sweet odor that defines the Amazon's edges. A hand enters the frame briefly, fingers slick with fish slime from a hook just removed. There is no panic, no urgency, just routine movement, practiced and casual. The cut is barely visible, a shallow slice across the pad of a finger, the kind of injury that barely registers as pain. Blood doesn't pour, it beads, thins instantly, and disappears into the water like dye dropped into tea. That is all it takes. Below the surface, the river is not empty. It never is. Shadows detach themselves from shadows, subtle shifts in density that would go unnoticed if you didn't know how to look. Piranhas do not rush in like a cinematic wave. They tighten. The school compresses slightly, bodies angling inward, tails flicking with restrained energy. The movement is not chaotic, it is organized, almost economical. This is not hunger in the human sense. It is opportunity assessment. In a river where food arrives unpredictably and competition is constant, hesitation costs more than aggression ever will. Piranhas are often described as blood-crazed, but that framing misses the biology entirely. Blood alone is not the switch. What matters first is disturbance. A fish thrashing on a line sends pressure waves through the water, vibrations picked up by the lateral line system that runs like a sensory antenna along each piranha's body. This system does not hear sound as we do. It reads changes in water movement, translating turbulence into spatial information. A struggling fish is not just food, it is a signal that something has already failed. Injury, exhaustion, disorientation. In evolutionary terms, that is the safest meal available. The cut on the finger matters because it completes the equation. Blood adds chemical confirmation to a mechanical cue. Piranhas possess a highly developed sense of smell, tuned to detect amino acids and other compounds released by damaged tissue. But without motion, without vibration, those molecules disperse slowly in the current, diluted and ambiguous. Add commotion, a fish splashing, a human shifting weight, boots scraping mud, and the river becomes readable. Information sharpens. A feeding opportunity resolves from noise into clarity. What unfolds next is not a frenzy, but a narrowing of options. Individual piranhas probe the edges of the disturbance, making fast, testing passes. Their bodies are built for this, laterally compressed, muscular, capable of explosive acceleration over short distances. The jaws are the most famous feature, triangular teeth that interlock like pinking shears, but the real weapon is decision speed. Each bite is a calculation measured in milliseconds. Take a piece, retreat, reassess. There is no need to kill the source immediately. In a system like this, weakness multiplies itself. Human hands are particularly vulnerable, not because they are large, but because they are busy. Unhooking a fish, cleaning a catch, threading bait, these actions produce exactly the kind of irregular movement piranhas key in on. Fingers flash pale against dark water, then disappear, then reappear, creating contrast and rhythm. A small cut continues to leak, invisible but persistent, marking the hand as compromised. Stress compounds the problem. Heart rate increases, movements become sharper, less controlled. From below, this reads as escalation, not retreat. Stepping into the water with existing cuts introduces a different risk profile. Here, the disturbance is lower, but the exposure is longer. Calves and ankles move through submerged vegetation, brushing against stems and roots, stirring silt. The lateral line picks this up immediately. Piranhas investigate not because they are starving, but because the pattern is unfamiliar. In the Amazon, novelty is often vulnerability. Most large animals approach the water cautiously. Those that do not are usually sick, injured, or desperate. A human wading confidently breaks that rule, triggering attention. The irony is that piranhas are not apex predators. They are mid-level opportunists, constrained by their own vulnerability. They avoid unnecessary risk, staying close to structure and retreat routes. This is why attacks often involve quick, shallow bites rather than sustained assault. A finger, a toe, a strip of flesh, taken cleanly and efficiently. The damage is surgical, not savage. The teeth are designed to slice, not tear, minimizing resistance and maximizing speed. Blood loss can be rapid, not because of the number of bites, but because the wounds they create bleed freely in warm water, where vasodilation prevents clotting and bacterial load is high. Ecologically, this behavior serves a function. Piranhas act as the river's quality control, removing injured fish, disposing of carcasses, recycling nutrients back into the system. They enforce a brutal efficiency that keeps disease and decay from accumulating. But that same efficiency becomes dangerous when humans misread the rules of the environment. We expect predators to announce themselves, to chase, to threaten. Piranhas do none of that. They wait for error. Temperature plays a subtle role here as well. In warmer water, piranha metabolism increases. Digestion speeds up, activity levels rise, and responsiveness to stimuli sharpens. During low water seasons, when rivers shrink and fish densities increase, competition intensifies. Feeding opportunities are exploited faster because delay means loss. A tiny cut in these conditions is not just a wound. It is an anomaly in an already crowded sensory field, something that stands out precisely because everything else is under pressure. There is a misconception that stillness guarantees safety. In reality, stillness only works if it is complete. A hand held motionless at the surface, bleeding slowly, may go unnoticed for longer than one that moves, but rivers are not static. Currents shift, debris drifts, insects fall, fish bump into one another. Eventually, some form of disturbance intersects with the chemical trail, and the system reactivates. The danger is not sudden chaos, but delayed consequence. This is why many piranha injuries occur during moments of inattention rather than overt risk. The fisherman focused on the hook, the cleaner focused on the blade, the wader focused on balance. Attention narrows, and situational awareness collapses inward. Meanwhile, the river remains fully aware. Every movement is catalogued, every signal cross-referenced. There is no malice in this process, only adaptation honed by time. Seen from this perspective, piranhas are less monsters than mirrors. They reflect the cost of small mistakes in a system that does not forgive them. One cut, one splash, one lapse in control. Combined, they create a feeding opportunity where none existed moments before. The lesson is not fear, but precision. In the Amazon, safety is not about dominance or confidence. It is about understanding what the environment is watching for and refusing to provide it. By the time the hand withdraws from the water, the surface looks unchanged. The river resumes its slow slide past the bank, leaves spinning lazily in the current. But below, the school loosens again, shadows dispersing, attention shifting elsewhere. The opportunity has passed, logged and dismissed. The injury remains, small and deceptively clean, carrying with it the reminder that in this ecosystem, nothing dramatic needs to happen for things to go wrong. All it takes is one opening and a river that knows exactly how to use it. The danger appears at the exact moment you decide nothing is there. Shallow water invites confidence. It looks readable, transparent, reduced to ankle-deep ripples and pale sand. People step into it the way they step onto solid ground, without pause, without testing, without imagining that anything large or capable of harm could be sharing the same space. In the Amazon and its connected river systems, that assumption fails quietly and immediately. Stingrays do not announce themselves because their survival depends on not being announced. They are not ambush predators in the traditional sense. They do not hunt people, nor do they chase. They disappear. Their bodies flatten against the substrate, fins pulsing gently to draw sand over their backs until outline, color and texture dissolve into the riverbed. Eyes remain exposed just enough to read silhouettes above. Spiracles draw water for respiration without lifting sediment. To an untrained eye, the ray is not hidden. It simply ceases to exist. This is why the chapter is called One Step. There is no warning sequence, no escalation. One misplaced foot lands squarely on a living animal whose only viable defense is reflex. The sting is not an attack. It is an emergency response. The tail whips upward in a tight arc, and a serrated spine drives into whatever triggered it. The motion is fast enough that the victim often does not realize what happened until pain floods in afterward. The wound is a puncture, not a slice. That distinction matters. Puncture wounds trap damage internally. The stingray's spine is barbed, coated in mucus and venom, and capable of penetrating deeply into muscle or soft tissue. When it is pulled free, either by recoil or by the victim's movement, it leaves behind torn fibers, foreign material, and a channel that bleeds inward as much as outward. Swelling follows quickly. Venom compounds disrupt cell membranes and intensify pain signaling, but the mechanical injury is often more significant than the toxin itself. Tissue compresses, nerves are irritated, and mobility drops sharply. Ankles and feet are common sites, and those structures are not optional for balance or escape. Within minutes, walking becomes difficult. Within moments, the water that felt safe becomes a liability. This is where the wound call reasserts itself. Blood in water is not metaphorical danger. It is informational. Even small amounts disperse rapidly, creating chemical gradients that persist longer than movement alone. The stingray does not follow this signal. It has already retreated. But the environment receives it. A puncture wound in shallow water announces injury to everything else tuned to detect it. At the same time, mobility loss changes behavior. A person who could move confidently now hesitates. Steps become uneven. Splashing increases as balance is lost and regained repeatedly. Each movement amplifies disturbance, broadcasting presence more loudly than before. The system compounds the mistake without requiring any additional actors. Shallow water is especially deceptive because it collapses the perceived boundary between land and river. People treat it as an extension of shore, assuming predators belong deeper, farther out. In reality, shallow margins are some of the most biologically dense zones in aquatic systems. Nutrients concentrate here. Small fish feed. Invertebrates burrow. Larger animals pass through precisely because prey does. Stingrays exploit this productivity without advertising themselves. Their flattened bodies allow them to occupy space that would otherwise be unusable. They regulate populations of bottom-dwelling organisms, aerate sediment through their movements, and recycle nutrients. Their presence is not an anomaly. It is a structural feature of the ecosystem. Humans intersect with that structure through habit, wading to cool off, crossing streams, standing still to fish. Each behavior increases the odds of a stationary foot meeting a stationary animal. Unlike stepping on a sharp object, the stingray reacts dynamically. The injury is not passive. It is tailored by reflex to penetrate and disable long enough for escape. The immediate pain often dominates attention, but the long-term risk lies elsewhere. Puncture wounds seal poorly. They trap bacteria from the environment and from the ray's own spine sheath. Warm water accelerates microbial growth. Swelling reduces circulation, impairing immune response. Even when venom effects fade, infection risk remains high if wounds are not managed properly. This is why stingray injuries are rarely just painful, they are destabilizing. A foot that cannot bear weight forces altered gait. A person limping in water is slower, louder, and more vulnerable. Exiting the river becomes harder. Re-entry may be unavoidable. What began as a single-step error expands into prolonged exposure. There is an ecological irony here. Stingrays are among the least aggressive animals humans encounter in these systems. They do not pursue, corner, or investigate. They are injured far more often by humans than the reverse. But their defensive mechanism is calibrated to stop interaction instantly, not politely. The goal is not deterrence through display. It is deterrence through consequence. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. A stingray cannot afford repeated contact with large animals. It must end encounters immediately or risk being crushed. The venom intensifies pain to ensure rapid withdrawal. The puncture ensures the threat disengages even if pain tolerance is high. The system does not rely on the predator's judgment, only on physics and physiology. The practical lesson embedded here is uncomfortable because it contradicts intuition. Clear, shallow water feels controllable. In reality, it removes the visual cues you rely on and replaces them with false confidence. The sand looks empty because the animal has made it so. The absence of motion is not safety. It is camouflage working as intended. Experienced river workers move differently. They slide their feet rather than stepping, shuffling to push rays away before weight commits. They assume occupancy, not absence. They understand that shallow water concentrates interaction rather than eliminating it. This chapter does not ask the audience to fear rivers. It asks them to abandon the idea that depth correlates with danger. In the Amazon, danger is often concentrated where humans feel most relaxed: edges, margins, crossings, places where movement slows and awareness drops. The stingray's role in this narrative is precise. It demonstrates how a single, unremarkable action, one step, can convert safety into exposure instantly. No build-up, no villain, just an animal doing exactly what it evolved to do when pressure appears from above. By the time help is needed, the cause feels almost insulting in its simplicity. One step, one puncture, one mistake compounded by physics, biology, and time. The ray is gone. The water looks unchanged. The injury remains, pulsing, swelling, slowing you down. Shallow water is not safe water. It is shared water. And in shared systems, the cost of forgetting that is paid immediately in blood, balance, and mobility. The water is black, not because it is empty, but because it is full. In Amazonian blackwater rivers, vision fails early. Tannins leached from decaying leaves stain the water the color of tea, absorbing light and erasing depth. Shapes dissolve within centimeters. The surface reflects the sky like a mirror, while everything beneath it becomes abstraction. For humans, this creates a dangerous illusion. If you cannot see it, it must not be there. In these rivers, that assumption is fatal. Sight is not the primary sense that governs interaction here. It never was. This is the scariest rule of the system. In blackwater, your eyes are decorative. Electric eels are not monsters lurking blindly in darkness. They are among the most perceptive animals in the Amazon, operating in an environment where visual information is unreliable at best. They do not hunt by chasing silhouettes or reacting to splashes alone. They read the world through distortion, through the way bodies interrupt an invisible field that the eel itself generates. Electrolocation is not electricity used as a weapon. It is electricity used as perception. Weak electrical pulses ripple outward from the eel's body, spreading through the water and returning altered by whatever they encounter. A rock bends the field one way. A submerged branch bends it another. A living animal, with nerves firing and muscles charged, warps the field dynamically, creating a signature that cannot be confused with inert matter. The eel does not see these objects, but it knows them with a precision that vision could never achieve in this environment. This sensory system is not passive. It is active, continuous, and three-dimensional. The eel does not wait for movement to detect presence. Stillness does not equal invisibility here. A stationary body still conducts electricity. It still interrupts the field. It still exists. This is where human intuition collapses completely. People assume danger requires pursuit, that something must move toward you to threaten you. Electric eels invert that logic. They do not need to chase. They wait within their sensory bubble, mapping distortions, updating constantly. When something enters that space, the eel already knows its size, conductivity, orientation, and movement pattern long before contact occurs. Injured animals stand out immediately. A healthy fish moves smoothly, rhythmically, generating predictable electrical noise. Its muscle contractions are coordinated. Its field signature is stable. An injured fish breaks that pattern. Movements become erratic. Muscle firing becomes asynchronous. Spasms replace propulsion. The electrical distortion flickers unevenly, broadcasting vulnerability more loudly than blood ever could. The eel does not need to test this prey. The physics of its nervous system have already betrayed it. The same rule applies to humans, even though we are not prey in the traditional sense. When a person enters Blackwater, they bring a body full of electrical activity into an environment where such signals are rare and valuable. The human nervous system is loud. Muscles fire constantly to maintain balance. Breathing shifts posture. Panic amplifies everything. Splashing does not just make noise, it changes electrical geometry. Arms thrash. Legs kick unevenly. The field distortion grows chaotic. To the eel, this reads as distress. The electric eel's high-voltage discharge is often misunderstood as an offensive weapon used indiscriminately. In reality, it is a control mechanism deployed with precision. Short bursts are used to probe and confirm. Stronger discharges are reserved for moments when disabling a target quickly matters, either to subdue prey or to deter a threat that has entered too close. The shock is not designed to kill large animals outright. It is designed to remove coordination. Muscles seize involuntarily. Balance disappears. In water, where control is already marginal, this is devastating. A person shocked unexpectedly may inhale water, lose footing, or collapse into deeper sections. The eel does not need to follow. The environment does the rest. This is the final expression of the wound call principle. An injured or panicked human does not just bleed. They broadcast. Their movements become louder in every sensory channel that matters here: mechanical, electrical, behavioral. In Blackwater, vision provides no warning and no reassurance. The eel does not need to approach aggressively. It simply waits for the moment when distortion crosses a threshold that makes interaction unavoidable. There is an important ecological context to this behavior. Electric eels are apex controllers of their niche, but they are not reckless. High-voltage discharges are metabolically expensive. They do not waste them. An eel prefers to avoid unnecessary encounters, conserving energy for feeding and survival. This is why many human interactions occur suddenly and unexpectedly, without prior escalation. The eel tolerated presence until conditions changed enough to justify action. Those conditions are rarely about proximity alone. They are about ease. A calm human moving slowly, evenly, creates a stable distortion. The eel registers it, tracks it, and often chooses to remain still. A human who stumbles, thrashes, or bleeds becomes a fluctuating signal demanding attention. The eel responds not out of aggression, but because the physics of the situation have shifted. Blackwater environments magnify this effect because they strip away redundancy. In clear water, animals rely on multiple senses simultaneously: vision, lateral line, smell. In Blackwater, electrolocation dominates. There is no cross-check from sight to slow decisions down. Distortion equals information. Information triggers response. This is why electric eels are so effective without being constantly dangerous. They are not patrolling for victims. They are monitoring their sensory field continuously, letting the environment filter interactions for them. Most things pass through without incident. Only those that become conspicuous through injury, panic, or poor movement trigger escalation. The final punch of this chapter is not about fear of electricity. It is about surrendering the illusion of control. In Blackwater, you do not get to choose when you are seen. You only influence how you are read. The Amazon does not need to chase you. It does not need to pursue, corner, or overwhelm. It does not need speed or surprise in the ways humans imagine danger. It waits. It observes through systems older and more reliable than vision. It responds when your own biology makes you easy to interpret. The electric eel embodies that rule perfectly. It does not hunt with its eyes. It does not care what you look like. It does not need to move toward you to know you are there. It waits inside a world you cannot read, listening to distortions you cannot feel, until your own panic, injury, or imbalance announces that the interaction has crossed from coexistence into consequence. In Blackwater, blindness is mutual only if you assume the river sees the way you do. It does not. And by the time you realize that your eyes have nothing to offer you here, the system has already made its decision.